This is a true story from my life. I was 22 when a family game night in Clifton, New Jersey, turned into the night I learned exactly how far a smile could stretch before it snapped. They called me a loser over a Scrabble board at my aunt's dining table the same second a folded Hyatt Regency folio slipped out of my boyfriend's gray hoodie and skated across the runner, 2 room keys tucked inside like they were shy. A muted Celtics game crawled captions on the TV. My uncle's laughed at its usual stage work in the background, and the living room smelled like lemon pledge and pepperoni. Tori, my cousin, flipped her iPhone face up to kill the topic, but all that did was light the cracked glass with a fresh Uber receipt stamped Hyatt Regency Boylston Street 2 nights ago. The keys clicked together on the wood, as if they were clearing their throat to testify. If you genuinely enjoy our stories, please subscribe to the channel, tell us where you're from, and what time it is right now. It's always fascinating to know how far our story flows. My name is Maya. I'm a Northeastern student who lives off Hemingway in a 3rd-floor walk-up that smells like toast because the guy downstairs takes breakfast like a religion. When this happened, I just wrapped a 6-month co-op at a tiny logistics startup in the seaport, the kind with flat-packed desks, and a CEO in Allbirds who thought weekly Peloton screenshots counted as leadership. My roommate Jess says I collect receipts like pressed flowers. Funny, because the only thing that saved me that winter was how carefully I kept paper trails. Evan, my then boyfriend, was a walking TED Talk about confidence. Private equity intern downtown, treasurer of his fraternity, the sort of man who says Americano, triple, no room, like the men in my family, loud enough to catch the light. He called my major, information systems, practical. He meant it as a compliment that kept the leash soft. To most of my family, this meant Evan was a good bet. To me, it meant he could write a room's rules with a grin and a shrug and a hand on the back of your chair. Before the folio fell, there were the usual hairline fractures, his phone on Do Not Disturb at midnight with the special setting that silences even favorites. My name saved as Maya, because you're my vault, he'd said, like a promise. His location sharing glitching anytime there was a mixer. A crispy shade of lipstick I don't own, mean American red, on his hoodie once. My cousin Tori owns that shade. Tori works at a boutique PR firm in Jersey City. She's a year older, knows the flattering side of every room, and can do a perfect laugh that slides over the parts you should examine. We spent summers sharing secrets and swimming in each other's backyards until high school made us spar with smiles. She calls me sister. Sometimes it feels like she means understudy. 2 weeks before game night, I found the first breadcrumb. Jess and I were on the couch, me half asleep with my laptop open to a data model diagram, when she said, "This is probably nothing but," and handed me her phone. On her screen, Evan paid Tori on Venmo $38.50 with a pizza slice and a champagne bottle. "It's pizza," Jess said. Her eyebrows were parentheses. "It's champagne," I said, my stomach already lowering the stage lights. Second breadcrumb. Our building had just switched to a smart entry app that logs guest codes. In October, I texted Tori a temporary code because she wanted to drop off a sweater she'd borrowed. In January, while I was in Manhattan for a student conference, that same code pinged twice, 12:41 a.m. and 2:06 a.m., 2 nights back to back. When I scrolled back, there were an extra 6 entries scattered over the month like sprinkles. It wasn't that the app caught him, it was that he assumed I'd never read the boring logs. People like Evan have faith the line items bore you into forgiveness. Third breadcrumb arrived by accident. A week earlier, I'd left my metal water bottle in an Uber. The driver texted me a photo from the back seat. "Left this?" Not my bottle, but the edge of a gray hoodie was in the frame, and tucked in that pocket was a folded Hyatt folio wrapped around 2 room keys. I recognized the hoodie. It was Evan's. The driver still had the paper. We met at the Dunkin' on Mass Ave. He slid the folio across the table. "People leave their stories everywhere," he said. This one smiled. Inside, Evan's name, boyish with the loop he puts on his E, a concierge note about champagne amenity delivered to room 1422, 2 breakfasts to the room, a signature I'd seen on 1,000 bar tabs. Even then, I didn't go nuclear. When you're raised in a family that coats pain with jokes like ranch dressing, blowing up is called selfish. The first time I told my Aunt Marisol that Evan had been tagged at a Bruins game the night he said he was sick and missed my capstone presentation, she'd patted my hand and said, "Men exaggerate, Misha. We're lucky if they exaggerate in the right direction." So when we rolled into her house for game night, cookies on platters, solo cups that smelled like Sprite and bourbon, my Uncle Ray telling the one about how meter maids are part of a conspiracy, I picked a different strategy. I would not give Evan the gentility of privacy. We made teams, boys versus girls, which is how you divide a family when you're doing it wrong. Mateo, who is 10 and a walking sound effect, shouted "loser" when the Celtics bricked a 3. The word lifted off the TV and landed on me, because Evan laughed and because the room was already primed to find me cute when I was small. People asked Evan about his internship. "They say I have instincts," he said, casual and loud. His hand landed on the back of Tori's chair in a way that broadcast familiarity. "Some people just have it." "What about you, Maya?" my Uncle Ray said, the tone reserved for strays. "You're still figuring it out?" "She's practical," Evan said on cue, as if he were reading from a menu. "Practical is a vibe. She's my vault." Jess, who came as moral support, because she knows I need a wing in certain rooms, leaned into my ear. "Practical is what they call you when they don't want to give you a trophy." I squeezed her hand under the table. The vanilla candle on the windowsill burned sweet and thick, and the windows wore winter's breath. That's when the folio fell, clean, timed like a theater cue. 2 room keys slid out, one in a sleeve-inked 1422, one bare, and did a small plastic knock as they bumped the wood. Tori's eyes shot down and away. Her phone, face up now, pulsed again. "Uber, Hyatt Regency, 1:23 a.m. "Evan," I said, my voice doing the soft that precedes the crack. He didn't look at me. "What?" He craned toward Uncle Ray like we were mid-joke, recovering the vibe, the way men do when they assume the room is their parachute. "Must have been. The firm put me up last week after a client dinner went late." "I wasn't in Boston last week," I said. "You told me you were sick. Your Instagram story shows you and the boys with $19 margaritas at Lolita." Tori breathed in. Aunt Marisol, the mayor of decorum, smoothed the table runner. "Evan, say something," she said, which is exactly the kind of sentence that teaches men how easy it is to rent your voice. "You're spiraling," Evan said, still to the room. "You've been off lately. You get paranoid. You make a thing out of nothing. I'm patient. Not everyone would be." The room's muscles tightened. It's always the same chorus at first. Don't escalate. Don't embarrass us. Don't be the story. Smile and win in silence. I have always been good at reading instructions. That night, I chose a different manual. "New game," I said. I reached into my tote bag and took out 3 manila envelopes Jess and I had labeled an hour earlier in thick black Sharpie. I didn't slam them. I placed them on the table like napkins. The kitchen light reflected off their surfaces. Family is the most blinding fluorescent you'll ever stand beneath. Evan laughed. "You cannot be serious." "I'm done being cute," I said. "Exhibit A." I slid out the Hyatt folio photo the Uber driver had sent me, then the physical folio itself, then the concierge note. "Champagne amenity delivered." My aunt read the handwriting twice, as if the loops might reform into a better reality if she asked nicely. Exhibit B. My phone, set to airplane so nothing could interrupt, was ready with screenshots, the building's guest code log, Tori's code, time-stamped after midnight on the nights I was out of town, the Venmo payments with pizza and champagne emojis, the Uber receipts hopping between Tori's, apartment and back bay. "Everyone uses each other's codes," Evan said, still half smiling, like this was all performance art, and I was lucky to be his improv partner. "This is crazy, Maya. You can't just—" Exhibit C. A page from his capstone draft that matched my prior paragraph, down to the comma I move before my conjunctions. I flipped my laptop around to the Google Doc version history. My name, date stamped 2 days before his submission. "You asked me to polish a few lines on Slack." I held up my phone so they could see his words. "Can you clean up this part? You're better with intros." "I kissed your brain." Then his next message, "Nailed it, thanks." He'd pasted my paragraph into his draft intact. "Academic integrity isn't a vibe," I said. "It's a policy." Uncle Ray gave a weak chuckle. "PowerPoint at family game night?" He reached for a slice he didn't want. "When people are scared, we feed each other. Or we try to." Exhibit D. A printout from Alpha Kappa Psi's Code of Conduct, the clause that required removal from leadership for conduct reflecting dishonor upon the fraternity, including academic dishonesty and harassment. "Your chapter advisor has the screenshots," I said. "I sent them this afternoon because version control is a love language." Evan's mouth went flat. This was the sound of a man realizing the room might not be his forever. He switched tactics. "Maya," he said, finally using my name like a spell. "We can talk about this privately. You're humiliating yourself." "You laughed when Mateo yelled, 'Loser,'" I said. "You wanted the room, so we're in the room." Tori finally spoke. "You're being, dramatic," she said, finding the tone that had rescued her from consequences since we were 13. "Hotels happen. I'm in and out of the city all the time. Sometimes people are in the same places." "It's a Hyatt on Boylston," I said, "near where Evan was too sick to come watch me present the capstone he partially copy-pasted. The concierge note mentions champagne. You love champagne, Tori." "Stop," Aunt Marisol said, her hostess voice quivering, like she could reset the table with tone alone. "She's not a villain. She's a woman raised to keep rooms from breaking, even when the room is a rib cage." I didn't stop, not because I wanted to be cruel, because I wanted to be clear. "If Exhibit E matters to anyone but me," I said, "it's this letter." From my bag, I slid out a printed acknowledgement from Northeastern's Office of Academic Integrity, case number and all. "They opened an investigation," I said. "They've pulled his draft and mine. They scheduled a hearing." Evan reached for the folio as if folding it shut could fold the night back to safe. His hand froze when he saw my next envelope. "Last one for now," I said. "Exhibit F." I held up the rider from our lease. The clause about unregistered overnight guests. No more than 3 nights per month without prior consent. Documentation is grounds for removing a month-to-month occupant. Evan liked to introduce himself as my co-tenant, like his presence was a gift I should thank publicly. He wasn't on the lease. "The landlord has the log," I said. "Your status ends Friday. I chose the blue tape to mark your boxes because you like blue. I kept the coffee grinder because it's mine." Evan's bravado lilted. "You wouldn't." "I already did," I said. He looked around for an ally and found only people suddenly fascinated by napkin folding. The balance had shifted 2 degrees. Sometimes that's all it takes to slide a man's certainty off the table. Here's where I admit my revenge wasn't the flaming sword variety. It wasn't dramatic enough to trend or gory enough for the worst parts of the internet. It was lawful. It was patient. It used forms. After we packed up and left my aunt's house that night, I pulled out the one exhibit I hadn't placed on the table, the one that would recast the word loser so hard it would warp around me like glass in a kiln. But in that dining room, I wanted to show process, not payoff. Payoff would come later. Payoff would be mine. We finished Taboo because families cling to continuity like a lifeboat. My mother, quiet all night, pinballed between the sink and the table, refilling cups and wiping crumbs. That didn't matter. When people don't know how to save you, they clean. Jess stacked my envelopes and slid them back into my tote with the tenderness you use for a friend's broken arm. Evan dropped his voice to that dangerous register, performing calm for men, steel for me. "We should talk," he murmured, angling his body to block the room, as if privacy now would be mercy. "You're making a spectacle." "It's only a spectacle when a woman refuses to be the scenery," Jess said, almost conversationally, which somehow made the words heavier. On the drive back to Boston, the Mass Pike, a dark tunnel that spits you out into whatever version of your life you're brave enough to claim, Jess asked, "You ready?" "For what?" I kept my eyes on the lanes, white dashes stitching the night. "To stop carrying everyone else's embarrassment," she said. "It's heavy, and it's not yours." "I can carry my own," I said, "but I'm putting theirs down." The next morning, the city woke gray and loud, the way it does when the river wine slices you into someone new. I made coffee in the chipped white mug I bought at the Goodwill on Boylston for $1. The mug says, "World's okayest boss." I like it because it's a joke you can also mean. Then I opened my laptop and finished the paperwork I'd started the week before. I called the HR hotline for Evan's firm, the one with the polite recording that warns you your call may be monitored for training. I described a potential confidentiality breach by an intern named Evan C. Screenshots of texts he'd sent from a firm-issued laptop to teach my cousin how financial modeling worked, complete with a slide from a live deal deck stamped internal use only. I attached the screenshots. I included my number. Calm beats outrage when you want policy on your side. Then I emailed Evan's fraternity chapter advisor with the code of conduct excerpt, the version history, and the Slack request where he asked me to polish his intro. I did not editorialize. I numbered the attachments. I CC'd no one extraneous. Professional tone is a blade kept clean. Then I forwarded the building's guest log to my landlord with a short note. Per clause 7B, this constitutes grounds for terminating the month-to-month occupant's status. I added, I will be changing the Wi-Fi password. I will maintain common area cleanliness per our agreement. I appreciate your prompt confirmation. He replied within the hour. Understood. Effective Friday. Jess popped out of her room in socks and an old northeastern hoodie, hair a cloud. War room? She asked, sliding onto the stool. Form room, I said. I'm filling out ethics. We boxed Evan's stuff that afternoon. Once his life wasn't splayed everywhere like proof of his importance, it fit into 6 banker's boxes and 1 duffel. Jess wrote Evan, desk, and Evan, bathroom in block letters. I put his gifted Patagonia vest on top of the box labeled MISC so he'd see it first and remember the absurdity, how men like him build uniforms out of logos. He texted twice. First, this is insane. Second, we need to talk like adults. Third, after I didn't reply, don't make me your content, Maya. That one almost made me laugh. People like Evan think they invented narrative. He arrived at dusk, hat low, chin mapped with stubble that wanted to read as suffering. He stood in the doorway because I didn't invite him in. You're throwing your life away, he said, over nothing. I'm throwing out dead weight, I said, over everything. He picked up the box marked Evan, desk, and tried a final angle. You're not going to survive Boston without me, he said, like it was kind. I advocated for you. I made you palatable. Not palatable, I said. Visible, and only in rooms you owned. I stepped aside so he could pass with the box. Find another mirror. When he left, I changed the Wi-Fi name to Vault But For Me, and the password to a line only I would remember. The first sentence I ever wrote that made me feel like a person. I boiled pasta. Jess and I ate on the couch, bowls balanced on our knees, Netflix asking if we were still watching, as if the algorithm worried about our stamina. 2 days later, HR emailed to say they had retrieved Evan's laptop and would be in touch. The chapter advisor regretfully asked him to step down while they looked into things. Northeastern's Academic Integrity Office scheduled a hearing. The landlord confirmed the lock change for Friday at noon. None of it was cinematic. All of it was real. The only cinematic piece was the envelope I hadn't opened at my aunt's. It was sitting on my dresser in Boston, thick with a printed page stamped with the most improbable number I'd ever earned. I didn't inherit money. My father is a USPS lifer with calves like myths from 30 years of walking, and my mother has a daycare voice that can calm wolves. The number in my envelope had come from a thing almost no one in my family understood, least of all Evan, who loved pretending money was only about swagger. Here's how it happened. During my co-op, after I built a data pipeline that saved the startup's one senior engineer from living at his desk, the CEO called me into a Let's Be Creative meeting. "We can't pay you what you're worth," he said, leaning forward like confiding was compensation. "But we could do a small options grant if you stay 8 more weeks while Ben recovers." I texted Jess's brother. He's a corporate lawyer in Providence who answers my questions in voice notes like he's hosting a podcast for one person, and he said, "Ask for a double trigger clause, vesting monthly, and get the strike price in writing. Most people don't ask. That's why they don't get." I asked. They agreed. 4,800 options at 25 cents. In October, a quiet email. "We've been acquired by a publicly traded company. All cash." Ben cried in the bathroom. The CEO brought in cannoli. My vesting schedule, the double trigger, time plus termination without cause, clicked like a seatbelt. I signed, I exercised, I sold a chunk after the stock bumped 2 weeks later. I set aside taxes like a person who has learned entropy the hard way. And then, on a Tuesday that smelled like burnt coffee and printer paper, my brokerage account rolled into $612,405.36. Money isn't a god, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't feel like air. I did not buy a bag. I did not post anything. I made a T-bill ladder because 5% is a romance that doesn't cheat. I maxed my Roth IRA because 22-year-old me deserves to meet 62-year-old me with dignity. I set up a trust and named it for my grandmother Anna, who kept a 20 behind the sugar canister for bread. I kept a chunk liquid because practical doesn't have to be a leash, it can be a raft. When my aunt called family game night for the next weekend, because our family heals by returning to the scene with more cookies, I put that transfer confirmation in a manila envelope and wrote Exhibit K in Jess's neat hand. Not K for knife, though it would cut. K for kindness to myself. K for keeping my own score. Back in Clifton, the second game night began with overcompensation. My aunt hugged me too long. My uncle told a joke he didn't finish. My mother placed a hand on my back and left it there. The TV showed static pre-game chatter. Mateo asked if I was still mad at the TV people. Tori wasn't there. That made the air easier to breathe. We played Taboo, then charades because charades is stupid, and we needed stupid. I did Factory Reset with dramatic eyebrows. We laughed. Then Uncle Ray, in a predictable swing back to the safe center, said, "Just kidding about loser the other night. You know we love you, kiddo. Don't take things so hard." I could have let it pass. The temptation to make it small is a lifelong muscle. But I had an envelope that told the truth, louder than a joke. I took Exhibit K from my tote and set it on the table. "There's one last thing," I said. "Not about Evan." Aunt Marisol's hostess smile flickered. "Maya," she said, the way mothers of the world say, "Please be soft." "I am," I said. "With me?" I slid out the page. A transfer confirmation, 612-405-36, moving from my brokerage to the Anna Trust, my name. The account numbers blurred for privacy, the date, the proof. Family grapples with numbers like that as if they're misprints. Everyone waited for me to smile and say, "Just kidding." I didn't. Uncle Ray squinted, looking for the trick. "People our age don't." "They don't," I said. "Until they do?" I explained the options, the acquisition, the double trigger, the boring ladder, not bragging, mapping. I watched my aunt's expression change, not to awe, but to recalibration. It felt like someone finally moved a couch to see the dust on the floor we all pretended wasn't there. It wasn't luck. I said, more to the women than the room. It was reading the 10 pages no one else wanted to read, and asking for words in a contract people my age are told not to say out loud. My mother's eyes brimmed with something I'll name later. Pride, probably. Relief, maybe. Permission, definitely. She touched the edge of the paper like you touch a very old photograph. I expected Uncle Ray to make a joke about me buying him a boat. He didn't. He sat back. "Guess we should play a different game," he said softly, and for the first time in a long time, I believed he meant it. Uncle Ray shuffled the taboo cards like they might reveal a future where no one had said the wrong thing. He didn't say loser again. The word had done its job. It drew a hard little circle around everything that needed to break. Back in Boston, winter kept its sharpness. The MBTA screeched like it was complaining on my behalf. I spent the week building a binder at the long communal table outside Snell Library's basement, where the vending machines buzz loud enough to rearrange your thoughts. The binder was black, a color that looks like control. Inside, I built my case like I was a paralegal who'd swapped caffeine for religion. Tabs labeled timeline, policy, evidence, witnesses. I used clear plastic sleeves because the tactile neatness calmed the animal inside my chest that had been trained by a dozen small humiliations to hide. Jess took the 8 p.m. library shift with me like she was punching a time card to my recovery. We drank pavement coffee, the one on Gainsborough that always runs out of oat milk at 4 p.m., and she quizzed me like we were cramming for Civ Pro. "What's the principle?" she said, tapping the integrity policy. "First submission ownership," I said. "Original work, version history establishes authorship, collaboration disclosures required, blah blah, but blah blah is the part that matters." Tone, unemotional, numbers, dates. "What are you not doing?" "Insulting him," I said. The word tasted like something old. "That's a hobby. I'm here to do work." Between tabbing exhibits and answering the emails of my future self, I went to class and sat in rooms where people who didn't know me said things like, "There are 2 kinds of errors," and "you'll want to normalize that table," and "the midterm is open note, not open brain." I wrote code that passed tests. I let the work put my bones back where they belonged. If you want to get through grief without becoming a shape you don't recognize, run your hands over something that obeys logic. Evan tried logic of his own. A group me pinged at midnight in the Seaport Young Mafia chat, boys he drank with at Lolita and pretended to hate. The chat name was meant to be a joke, but wasn't. He wrote, "Maya is having an episode. If she reaches out, ignore. She stole my work. Be careful around her." The guy who worked nights at the Revere Hotel sent a thumbs up because men like that always side with the loudest person first. The guy who still wore his Patel brothers polo to pregame because he hadn't done laundry sent, "Sucks, bro." Someone I didn't know had screenshotted the whole thing and put it in my Instagram DMs with a note, "Not your friend, don't know you, but this felt gross." I didn't respond. I added it to the binder under a tab called Narrative. In pencil I wrote, "When people try to rewrite your memory, give the page a page number." Evan also tried family. He called my mother with a gentle voice he'd borrowed from the last decent thing he'd once had. "We're all under pressure," he said. "Your daughter is under a lot. I'm worried about her. She does dramatic things." My mother listened, then told him, "We raised a girl who does brave things." Then she hung up and texted me. He called me. I said the right thing, right? And I wanted to press the phone to my heart until it left a mark. Tori tried a different strategy, plausible remorse with an exit clause. She texted, "If we talk, I can explain." Then, "I never meant to hurt you." Then, "We can be on the same side again. We're family." I typed and erased a reply 3 times. When I finally responded, it was one sentence. "Thanks for returning my hoodie in October. The guest log appreciated your punctuality." No reply. A bubble appeared, then disappeared. I imagined her on her couch in Jersey City, ring light on a tripod still up from earlier because she'd filmed a "What's in my tote" video. I imagined her making a face for the camera with angles that blessed her. I imagined her telling herself a better story than the one she had earned. The hearing was in a conference room at Nightingale Hall, a building that smells like carpet glue and panicked students. The committee wasn't a tribunal, not really. 2 faculty, 1 student representative. The faculty wore the kind of sweaters that let you believe the world is predictable, and the student wore a suit like he'd borrowed adulthood for an afternoon. I sat on one side with my binder. Evan sat on the other with a blue folder that made a show of being thinner than mine. He had cut himself shaving and covered the nick with a piece of toilet paper that clung to his jaw long after it stopped being useful. The faculty chair said, "We appreciate the tone of both your written statements," which felt like the kind of sentence someone says when they're checking off a box that reads, "kind." Then I was asked to present. I didn't tell them about the champagne note or the Uber. If you bring your whole life to every battle, you'll have nothing left to wear. I kept to the hallway with the locked doors, submitted drafts, version history, Slack messages where he'd asked for just a quick polish, and the timestamps that made lying a geometry problem instead of a vibes war. My voice didn't shake. I reached for the water cup the committee had placed for me and anchored myself in the cheap bend of the paper. Evan said words that had worked for him in rooms like this since high school. "It's a misunderstanding," he said. "We collaborated, and then she got confused about who wrote what, and after we had a breakup, she escalated." "No one's asking about your personal life, the student rep said, almost kindly. A note of surprise in his voice suggested he'd expected me to be a different kind of girl. Evan tried to look wounded and almost pulled it off. He did that thing where men's pupils go to the ceiling to find a memory that flatters them. He said, "I would never. It's beneath me." And I watched the professors write without looking up. You can tell when the room is done pretending to be even. They adjourned with phrases that sounded like wheels clicking on a track. "We'll be in touch. We appreciate your patience. Integrity is the heart of our mission." When I stood to go, Evan hissed, "You're gleeful. It's disgusting." I turned to the window where the Prudential Tower scraped winter light. "I'm relieved," I said. "There's a difference." Outside, the wind slapped me with salt from the river. Jess waited on the bench with 2 hot chocolates. From Duncan, because she knows that a person should be sweet to you when you finish something hard. "How's your blood?" she asked. "Back in my body," I said. I could feel it again, that quiet drumbeat inside the wrists. "I think they saw me." "They did," she said without asking. "People who read things notice people who read things." We split a cruller. Sugar dusted my gloves. Across the path, a guy in a Husky's beanie kissed a girl, and the girl laughed into his hands the way I used to. The thought arrived, stayed, and kept walking. I let it go. I have learned to stop visiting old rooms wearing the clothes I cried in. HR at the firm wrote me the next day. The email came from someone named Alicia, whose signature included pronouns and a reminder she'd been doing this longer than Evan had been lying. "We have concluded our preliminary review," she wrote. "The intern in question has been placed on indefinite suspension pending a final decision. Your discretion is appreciated." I forwarded the email to myself with the subject line, "This happened in daylight." Then I closed my laptop and let myself breathe. The fraternity did not email me. They posted a form letter to their chapter Instagram. "Due to personal circumstances, our treasurer has stepped down to focus on academics. We are proud of his contributions. Rush events will proceed as planned." Jess sent it to me with, "Men will announce the weather while ignoring the thunder." We laughed. It loosened everything. The landlord sent a locksmith. At noon on Friday, the lock on our apartment door made a small, resigned sound and became a different lock. Evan arrived at 4 p.m. with 2 friends to fetch the last box and his sadness performance. I had placed the boxes by the door, labeled in Jess's neat block letters. He looked over my shoulder into the apartment he'd treated as a stage and tried to make his eyes look glassy. "I didn't cheat," he said, as if the truth could arrive late to its own meeting and still be taken seriously. "We got messy." "You sent a live deal slide to my cousin," I said. "People lose jobs for less." He flinched at that, not because he cared about ethics, but because he recognized a word he understands: jobs. He lifted the last box, and when he turned to go, he did one last thing, a small, petty, expensive thing. He took the pour-over dripper that was mine and slid it into his bag. "Seriously?" I said from the doorway. The hallway hummed with a radiator's tired anthem. "That's not yours." He paused, surprised not by his own theft, but by being caught at something so low to the ground. Then he put it back. "Whatever makes you feel like you won," he said. "I don't feel like I won," I said. "I feel clean." He left. I let the door close. The new lock clicked. The apartment exhaled with me. The campus paper, the Huntington News, reached out for a quote for a piece about the importance of version history in academic disputes. They promised anonymity. I gave them a sentence that could be carved on a bench. "Keep everything you write and learn to love the boring logs. They will love you back when you most need to be believed." I didn't read the comments when the story ran. I have learned to go where the good air is. Then Tori called. Not text. Called. Seeing her name on my phone lit up all the old circuits in my nervous system. I let it go to voicemail and listened with Jess standing in the doorway like an usher. "Maya," Tori said, voice flattened into apology radio. "Can we meet? Not to rehash, to resolve. I lost things too. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a conversation." Jess mouthed, "Hard pass," and pantomimed cutting a cord. I thought of the sugar 20 behind the canister. 15 minutes, I texted back. Curry Student Center, 2nd floor, public. Massachusetts is a two-party consent state. I had no plans to record. I planned to listen for the part of me that still wanted to be chosen by a story I had outgrown. Tori showed up in a camel coat and a face practiced for contrition. She sat across from me at a sticky table by the glass wall that looks out over the center of campus, where students flow like they're late to the future. She had a tote bag that probably cost what my rent did in college. She placed it on the table like a prop. "I'm not going to lie," she said, startling me by not starting with the lie. "I'm seeing a fallout at work. They're particular about conflicts, and the firm your ex interned for overlaps with one of our clients. My boss asked questions. I'm not here to beg you to fix it. I'm here to ask you to not make it worse." "I haven't called your boss," I said. "I told one truth to one person, HR at his firm. The consequences that rolled toward you were built by his choice, and your yes?" She swallowed. For a second, she was the kid who cried in my bunk bed when she broke our aunt's lamp and I took the blame. "I'm sorry," she said. The word was hot and reluctant, as if she had to drag it over gravel. "I didn't think. I liked the attention. I liked competing and winning. It made me feel like I was worth the light." "You are," I said, surprising myself with the absence of venom. "You didn't have to break me to stand under it." She looked past me at the stream of students. "He said you were going to become a problem," she said. "He said you'd lash out and make everything about you. I believed him." "Because it fit the version of me that made your life easier," I said. "That's fine. That version is dead." "What do you want?" she asked. She didn't say it softly. She was tired of performance, too. "Nothing," I said. "I have what I want. A new lock, a case number, a trust in my grandmother's name, a kitchen that doesn't smell like deception, and a binder I'll put in the closet when this is over and never open again." She blinked hard, like maybe there was a version of this where she got an assignment. "We're not going to do birthdays together for a while, are we?" she said, not a question. "We're going to let the room cool," I said. "We are going to choose not to be cruel when we could be." If I hear you're telling lies I can disprove, I'll disprove them in daylight. Then I'll go back to making my breakfast." She nodded, the version of her that speaks fluent spin struggling to conjugate quiet. When she stood to go, she touched the corner of my table with 2 fingers like a blessing. It wasn't. It was a goodbye. The hearing decision arrived with the week's recycling, a sealed envelope, heavy with the kind of paper that rustles important. I opened it at the kitchen counter, hands steady. Finding: significant overlap consistent with unauthorized use of another student's work. Sanction: failing grade on assignment, academic probation, ineligibility for leadership positions in student organizations during probation period, and required academic integrity workshop. There were more words. There always are. I took a photo of the paragraph that mattered and sent it to my mother with a single line. It worked. She sent back, "I always tell my kids to write down what hurts so they can see it. You wrote it down. I love you." HR sent their final note a week later. "Following our investigation, the internship offer is revoked. We appreciate your professionalism." The firm's email footer included an invitation to their Women in Finance webinar. I smiled at my laptop and closed it. You'd think the revenge would feel like fireworks. It didn't. It felt like finally sitting down after holding a heavy box through 3 stops on the Green Line because the train was too crowded to put it on the floor. It felt like peeling off a coat you bought in a moment of panic and realizing your own sweatshirt is warmer. Then came the invitation, which would be the last test of the part of me that loved spectacle. A mutual friend, a guy named Nate, who has a decent heart and a weak boundary, texted, "Evan's birthday thing Friday at Lolita Back Bay. Whole group reserving the side room. You coming? Be civil." Attached was the invite card with a photo of Evan pretending to blow out candles while making sure his jawline caught the light. Jess looked at me over her laptop. "You're not going," she said. "Don't feed the theater." "I'm not going," I said, and I meant it, but I was going to move the theater to a different stage. I pulled out my binder for what I knew would be the last time. From the back pocket, I slid a thin packet I'd prepared and not used, a 2-page, facts-only summary titled "Timeline of Events and Policies Invoked," written in neutral third person, names redacted to initials. It listed dates, attachments, guest, log, January 7-9, policies, lease writer 7B, Academic Integrity Clause 3.1, Fraternity Code 4.2, Firm Confidentiality Agreement Sections 2A and 5C, actions taken and outcomes. It read like the world I had wanted for myself, one where the truth, kept boring, wins slowly and then suddenly. "Who is this for?" Jess asked. "For me," I said, "and for anyone who ever sits where I sat and thinks, maybe I'm crazy." I put the packet in an envelope addressed to the student-run Women in Tech group, Attention Programming Chair. With it, I included a cover note, workshop proposal, receipts, red flags, and the boring logs that save you. I offered to lead a session in March for anyone who wanted to learn how to keep the kind of paper that holds when people start throwing theirs. Jess grinned. "Weaponized competence, Raul," she said. "My favorite genre." "Sanctified competence," I corrected. "I am devout." On Friday night, while Evan held court under pink neon and ordered the $19 margaritas he loved because they made him feel like part of a story where the lighting loves him back, I went with Jess to the Trident Booksellers and Cafe on Newberry Street. We ate pancakes for dinner. We shared a plate of fries because salt makes truth sit down easier. The cafe's front windows let us watch the parade of people on first dates and last nerves. At 9:15, my phone buzzed. It was Nate. "Wild," he texted. He made a speech about haters. Then someone's phone pinged with the campus news article. Half the room saw it. He pretended it wasn't about him. The check came, and nobody covered him. I resisted the temptation to ask for more. "Tell the server to add a cruller to the table," I texted back. "From me, for the person in the room who keeps the boring logs." We split another pancake. I let the relief settle. It was different from triumph. It had weight. It was legitimate. A week later, the Women in Tech chair, Ari, a sophomore who writes emails like they're invitations to oxygen, accepted my workshop proposal. "We need this," she wrote. "We'll book a room in ISEC, Interdisciplinary Science and Engineering Complex, the nice one with the good projector and the ugly carpet. Will you bring your binder? It can be your sword." "My sword is a 3-hole punch," I wrote back. "I'll bring it." Workshop day, I stood in front of 40 students, mostly women, some men brave enough to come learn, under a projector that made everyone look like they had just climbed out of a screen. I placed my binder on a lectern and held up the Hyatt folio photo, not like a trophy, but like a case study. "I'm not going to tell you who did what to me," I said. "That would make this about a person. We're going to talk about process. We're going to talk about keeping your own keys. I taught them to export Google Doc version histories. I taught them to download data from a smart lock. I taught them how to read a lease writer. I taught them how to write an HR email that sticks to the ribs of a policy. I made a handout with sample language and a checklist called, 'When you think you're going crazy, try this first.' I watched faces open. I watched people write down sentences like prayers. In the Q&A, a first year raised her hand, eyes shining like she was about to cry and was okay with that. 'What about the part where your family laughs?' she asked. 'How do you not become mean?' 'You don't,' I said. 'You become clear. Cruelty is a hobby. Clarity is a practice. Practice wins.' After, a girl in a floral dress I've seen 100 times on Newbury, but never liked more than on her, came up and said, 'I thought I was stupid for keeping every receipt, like I was a hoarder. Thank you for making me feel not ridiculous.' I told her what Jess always tells me. Everything you keep is a love letter to the version of you that will need it. The first time I saw Evan again was at the CVS on Mass Ave, aisle with toothpaste and harsh lighting that confesses everything. He looked smaller, not thinner, dimmed. He held a basket with razors and protein bars and an expression like he'd been sentenced to being an ordinary person. He caught my eye and looked away first. That used to be my job. It felt like a gift I hadn't asked for but could use. I did not gloat. I picked up floss and left him to the fluorescents. You do not have to announce to a collapsed empire that the walls have fallen. They can hear it. At home, Jess was taping a box labeled Winter to the closet shelf. "I am creating my future ease," she said, dust streaking her cheekbone like war paint. "So am I," I said, and slid my binder onto the top shelf behind the sweaters. I didn't bury it. I placed it where I could touch it if I needed to remember that the person who saved me was me. Spring crept in with the stubborn increments Boston demands. The river thawed. Students speculated about outdoor seating like it was a birthright. I bought tulips at the Trader Joe's at Symphony and put them in a chipped jar on the windowsill, right where the winter candle had made everything smell like vanilla sorrow. Tulips do not care who cheated on whom. They open anyway. I got an email from Northeastern's co-op office that made me laugh out loud and then clap a hand over my mouth like I'd broken a rule. It was from a recruiter at a different firm, mid-sized, decent reputation, who had seen my workshop listed on the Women in Tech page. "We value ethical rigor," she wrote. "Your workshop suggests you do too. Would you consider a summer co-op with our data governance team? We understand you are discerning." I read it twice. I wrote back once. "I'm interested," I said. The salary was not insult money. The benefits included a T-pass. I printed the email because I still like paper. The last loose thread was my aunt. Family. Game night resumed, as it always does in families that insist on moving forward on a beat. The next one fell on a Saturday with a soft sky. We brought a rose con gandules and a lemon tart from the bakery by the path, because my mother refuses to show up empty-handed even to her own house. When we arrived, Aunt Marisol met me with a hug I recognized as humility. She pulled back to look at my face like a nurse checking whether a patient is ready to walk. I am learning, she said. It wasn't an apology. It was what you say when you're a beginner and you're brave enough to announce it. We ate, we played, we did the stupid charades we needed. Halfway through, she said, I made a little ceremony and disappeared into the kitchen. She returned with the sugar canister, white ceramic with a painted strawberry on the side, and placed it on the table like a relic. She lifted the lid. Inside, a $20 bill and a small envelope with my name. I heard about the trust, she said, a smile that hurt her face. Your grandmother would have loved that you named it for her. I put this here for you, for bread. I opened the envelope. Inside was a little index card with handwriting I recognized because I've seen it on every birthday card since kindergarten. It said, "We will not call you names anymore to make ourselves comfortable. You are not practical. You are precise. We are proud," I cried. Not the ugly sobbing of the night everything fell. This was the body releasing an old job and picking up a better one. Mateo rolled his eyes because 10-year-olds hate ceremony. I dabbed at my cheeks with a paper napkin that said, "Let's play," in bubble letters. We resumed charades. On my way out, I took the Hyatt folio crane I'd left on the Monopoly box and tilted its paper beak so it faced the window. You can set down an object without pretending it never existed. You can let it keep watch while you go live. There was one more thing I had done, something that wasn't strictly revenge, but felt like a correction written in a generous pen. The night of Evan's birthday, while I ate pancakes at Trident, I had emailed the Hyatt Regency concierge, the one whose note had smiled at me like a dare. The email said, "You delivered a champagne amenity to room 1422 last month. I suspect it helped me eventually. Thank you for your work. Please apply this $100 toward any room service bill for a guest whose weekend takes a turn and who could use dessert." I signed it on a trust because I could. The concierge, a person named M, replied, "We'll see the right person gets the treat." They added a smiley face, drawn like it had been by a hand rather than a keyboard. It felt like lightness that costs money and is worth it. By April, campus greened. The women from my workshop started sending me small updates. Told my landlord I'm bringing a subletter, cited the lease. It was easy. Sent HR an email with bullet points. They fixed it. Printed my version history just in case. Slept great. The messages stacked like bricks in a house where no one has to sleep with the door locked. Evan stayed in Boston because leaving costs more when pride is your primary currency. I saw him once more at the crosswalk by Heinz Convention Center, both of us waiting while a delivery truck blocked the box like the city was staging a metaphor. He glanced at me, a flare of the old performance rising in his face and then dying without oxygen. He lifted a hand as if to wave. I kept my hands in my pockets and concentrated on the walk signal. When it flashed white, I crossed. He stood there a beat longer, like he was waiting for a cue that wasn't coming. At home, the tulips had opened as far as they knew how. The binder was on the closet shelf, tucked behind a Patagonia vest I kept, not because it was mine, but because it reminded me of a uniform I no longer needed anyone to applaud. Jess was sprawled on the couch, ankles crossed, scrolling rental listings for fun, the way some people scroll chaos. "Want to see a house we can't afford?" she asked. "I already live in the one I built," I said. And it was true. The walls weren't fancy. The lights were all the right kind of bright. I had promised myself I wouldn't make my life into content, and I didn't. But I did something small and large. I wrote a letter to the campus financial aid office proposing a micro-scholarship from the Anna Trust, $2,000 annually, to a first-gen woman in STEM who could tell us in 300 words about a time she read a document that changed her life. I specified, "The winner will have 1 hour of my time to go over any contract she's about to sign. I am not a lawyer. I am a woman who reads." It wasn't the kind of philanthropy that gets your name on a bench. It was the kind of help that might hand someone else a binder before the fire starts. They took me up on it. The first winner, R, wrote about the lease on her off-campus sublet and how she'd asked the landlord to remove a clause that would have made her responsible for damages incurred by any guest, with no limit. He removed it because she asked. "I didn't know I could ask," she wrote. "Now I know." I printed her essay, put it in my binder, and added a new tab, After. The last email I ever got from Evan was a single line. "You cost me everything." There was no you. It was sent to a version of me that had agreed to own his choices with him. I didn't respond. I created a filter that archived anything from his address. Then I made dinner. The last message I ever got from Tori for a long time was on my birthday in May. "Happy birthday. I'm learning too." I replied, "Thank you," and I meant it. Learning is the only God I'll kneel for. By the time the sun decided to become a daily presence instead of a rumor, my life had rearranged itself into something that didn't require an audience to feel real. I woke up early. I ran along the esplanade, where the river pretends to be a lake if you squint. I answered emails from people who wanted a copy of my checklist. I made toast that smelled like the apartment downstairs. I set my passwords to phrases that made me laugh quietly. I kept the sugar canister on the counter, and sometimes, when the day felt like the world was daring me to be small again, I opened it to make sure the 20 was still there. Then I closed it and did what I came for. I read. And still I knew the story needed one more image, one that would shutter the night for good and let the morning in. It arrived on a Saturday at noon, in a ballroom with bad carpet and dim chandeliers, in the precise moment where power trips in its own shoelaces. The fraternity's spring philanthropy gala, rebranded hastily after the resignation, was being held at a Marriott by the river. My Women in Tech workshop had gotten a booth because we'd partnered with the engineering dean's office to recruit mentors, and Events with Apps love booths with QR codes. ISEC had loaned us a pop-up banner that refused to unfurl straight, so Jess held it while I taped the bottom with painter's tape like a stagehand. Around us, men in navy suits did the platonic ideal of a laugh, and women in dresses found each other across rooms with that little relief smile women wear when they spot another woman with a plan. Evan was there, not as an officer, not as a speaker, as an attendee who believed proximity could turn into story if he posed near enough to the microphone. He wore a tie that tried too hard and a look that told you he thought the room still belonged to him if he could find the correct angle. The chapter advisor, gray at the temples, weary like he'd stopped loving his own voice, took the mic at one and did introductions and thanked sponsors and did the quiet, delicate song and dance of pretending the rebrand had been organic. Then, because the program said Integrity Award and never named the recipient, something happened that no one expected, not even me. "Before we present the student award," the advisor said, "we have a brief statement to read regarding our commitment to academic honesty and professional ethics." He nodded to the MC, who nodded to a staff member, who tapped a tablet, and up on the small projection screen behind the stage appeared 3 sentences in giant font. "Integrity is not a vibe, it is a policy. Version history is a love letter to your future self. Keep your own keys." My words. Pulled from the campus paper. Attributed not to me, but to Women in Tech workshop. I watched faces swing toward our little booth, like we had started a weather event. I felt the air pull. Evan's jaw flexed. He was close enough to our table that when people began to clap, not raucous, not theatrical, just steady, he could not pretend he didn't hear it. He looked at me, not like a dare, like a question he had finally learned is not mine to answer. The advisor concluded as gently as a person can conclude a lesson that had to be taught in public. "We believe in learning," he said. "Sometimes the learning hurts." He gestured toward our booth. "We appreciate our campus partners for teaching us boring, beautiful ways to be better." The applause grew, not because anyone loves policy, because rooms love truth when it's dressed like a second chance. Evan took a step back and bumped into a server carrying a tray of flutes. One flute fell, hit the carpet, and somehow didn't break. Champagne foamed, then settled. I watched a drop roll over the rim and hang, stubborn, then fall to the ugly carpet that swallows everything without drama. I remembered the concierge's smiley face. I reached into my tote and felt for the envelope that held the last printed thing in this story that would matter. The receipt from the bank, with the line that had fixed the word loser permanently, for me, if not for them. I didn't pull it out. I didn't need to anymore. I knew what it said. So did the room. I held Jess's hand under the table, the way people steady each other on boats just before the captain opens the throttle. We were not on a boat. We were in a Marriott ballroom with a banner that wouldn't lay flat and a policy on a screen and the smallest, truest possible victory. Daylight. Okay, Jess whispered. Now we can go home. Not yet, I said, and looked at the stage like a place where my friend Ari was about to stand up and become the person she already was. The part you might be expecting, the mic drop, the public confrontation, the dragging, didn't happen. Something better did. The award went to a student who had reported himself for a mistake on a lab report, taken the penalty, and then tutored first years in citation practices for a semester. He got a glass plaque. He deserved it. The room did a new sound, relief. When it was over, Evan left through the side exit, the way people leave when they don't trust doors to stay open for them anymore. I watched him go without narrative, which is the cruelest kindness I could offer. Then I stood, rolled my banner wrong so I'd have to fix it later, and thereby delay leaving in the way that felt right, and helped Ari carry a box of flyers to the elevator that smelled like 1998. On the ride down, Ari said, "Do you ever miss him?" She was young enough to think missing is a moral compass instead of a weather pattern. "I miss being the person who didn't see," I said, "but only because ignorance is warm. I don't miss living at its temperature." The elevator dinged at the lobby. I held the door for a woman pushing a cart loaded with dessert plates and thought about the email I'd sent the Hyatt concierge and hoped the right person had gotten the little joy that night when the lights made everyone look like better versions of themselves. For 3 seconds at a time. Joy also counts as policy if you enforce it gently. We stepped outside. The river was a flat sheet of pewter under a sky that had stopped threatening and started promising. I put my hands in my pockets and felt the outline of my keys, heavy and right. Across the street, the Prudential winked. Somewhere a bus exhaled. I turned to Jess and said, "Let's go home." And we did, walking into the kind of afternoon you can only see once you've let the room you were born into stop telling you who you are. After the gala, Jess and I walked back through the Back Bay like we were learning a new alphabet for a city we already spoke. We cut across Boylston and took the long way by the public garden, where bare branches made nervous maps in the air, and the lagoon wore a thin film that was neither water nor ice, just decision. The apartment smelled like toast because the downstairs neighbor lived the gospel of breakfast. I put my tote on the counter and took out the pop-up banner instructions I'd stolen from ISEC because I wanted to finally fold the thing properly. The banner gave up and rolled itself wrong again. Jess laughed until she cried. Sometimes that's all a night is asking for. The next morning, I woke up early and ran the mile loop on the Esplanade, the one that makes you feel like you're in a postcard if you squint and ignore the trash barrels with plastic bags flapping like surrendered flags. The river looked like pewter, the bridges like gray lace, and I felt the first clean click in my chest I'd had since the Hyatt Folio skated onto my aunt's runner. It wasn't joy, it was ease. School didn't pause because I'd reassembled a life. Professors asked me to submit assignments like they did before I learned that paperwork can be a sword. I went to the data governance co-op interview in a conference room with glass walls that made me feel like I was in a snow globe. The hiring manager, a woman named Priya with a precise bun and sneakers that said she doesn't need pain to feel professional, asked me questions that didn't perform feminism. They practiced it. "Tell me about a time a boring control saved you," she said, and I didn't have to inflate anything. I got the co-op. I signed the offer after I read every line and asked 3 questions about the non-solicit clause until the recruiter said, half amused, "We like you." I bought a monthly tea pass because the benefit was real, and because tap-tap at the turnstile feels like a well-tuned machine saying yes. I printed the offer and slid it into the binder behind a new tab labeled Work. The binder no longer looked like evidence, it looked like maintenance. At home, I changed the apartment in small ways that told my nervous system we were done surviving. I swapped the vanilla candle for a basil one that smells like summer kitchens and long afternoons where no one wants anything from you. I put the Hyatt paper crane on the bookshelf next to a used paperback copy of The Art of Doing Science and Engineering I found for $3 at the Harvard bookstore. The crane looked like it had something to teach and had at last found the right shelf. Sundays I called my father and walked his mail route with him over the phone. He's done the same cluster of streets for 20 years. He knows which dogs bark and which only look like they might. "You switch routes and you forget where the potholes are," he said. "You stay and the asphalt knows your name." He asked how school was, and I told him about the co-op and the workshop and the fact that students now sent me receipts in DMs like confessions. "You're your mother's daughter," he said, which was his highest praise. "You always liked the index cards." At the daycare where my mother works, spring means a lot of small shoes and a lot of small crying. I visited one afternoon with a bag of sidewalk chalk and a new step stool because the old one wobbled, and my mother pretends wobbly things are a part of life you can outlast. She introduced me to a 4-year-old who will own the world if the world learns to listen. "Maya?" she said. "Like the Maya Angelou book?" She loved that idea. I did too. I drew a hopscotch board in the cracked asphalt in back, and the kids jumped like gravity had finally agreed to play fair. I didn't hear from Evan for months. He didn't vanish. He simply stopped appearing in the places I was. People like him treat proximity like a superstition. If they get close to the people who no longer believe them, they think it might be catching. Once, at the Star Market on Boylston, I saw him through a gap between cereal boxes, and he saw me, and we did the adult thing where you both look away so fast you almost spin back around. That night, I flossed extra hard like I could scrape off the residue of a glance. Tori went quiet, too. I heard from Uncle Ray that she took a break from the PR firm and was consulting for a brand too small to be jealous of. My aunt called me more often, not to meddle, but to practice. "I made arroz con gandules and didn't say, 'Don't take things so hard to anyone,'" she reported once, proud. Progress. We are all beginners in rooms we thought we'd mastered. When my co-op started, the office sat on a floor high enough that the skyline came in like a screensaver. The team was 5 people and a backlog labeled Someday, which is what you call the pile of work you know can fix everything but no one ever budgets for. On my first day, Priya slid a stack of policies across the desk and said, "Let's make these readable. People ignore what they can't first understand." We changed sentences like "employees shall adhere to the principle of least privilege" to "you get only the access you need to do your job." We made flowcharts. We made checklists with checkboxes you actually wanted to check. We put in a mechanism for anonymous questions, and they poured in, not because people were confused, but because we'd finally given them a safe hallway to walk down. For lunch, I ate a turkey sandwich on the sunny steps outside and watched clients parade in and out, the lobby plants trying to grow in fluorescent light. I liked thinking I was essential to something that wasn't my survival. At night, I graded myself on softness, not gentleness for men who hadn't earned it, gentleness for me. Hazelnut spread on toast counts, clean sheets count. A bookshelf that doesn't care what it holds counts. So do the emails from workshop students and mothers and a sophomore guy named Theo who wrote, "I looked up a clause in our team code because of your checklist and avoided getting stuck with a group grade for someone else's plagiarism. This is not sexy, but it saved my semester." I replied, "Sexy is overrated. Saved is everything." Midterms came and went. Boston thawed in that obnoxious way where it brags every time the sun remembers how to act. The crew teams returned to the river. The ducks resumed their endless arguments. Jess and I did our taxes at the kitchen table with a bowl of pretzels between us, like we were negotiating a treaty. "You've been sitting on a capital gains bomb," she said, peering at my paperwork like it was a thriller. "You okay?" I was. My trust attorney had done the math. The government took its piece. I mailed what I owed. The receipt tasted like a clean tooth. I didn't realize I needed a new ending until my mother called on a Tuesday and said, "Your aunt wants to try game night again." The word try sounded like a leaf of lettuce apology on a burger of habit. I imagined the dining room table with its laminate top that holds grudges for years, the vanilla candle that would make a comeback, the Celtics trying to save us with a win. I didn't owe that room anything. I went anyway, not because of them, because the girl I'd been in that chair needed to walk back in with both hands open and leave with them still open. Saturday night, Clifton, New Jersey. A lane of houses that all nod to each other in the same tired way. The front door was open to air the winter out. Inside, I heard the hum of a dishwasher working too hard and my uncle telling a story about a raccoon he'd convinced to leave with the power of his voice. The table had a new runner. The candle was basil. My aunt had done research and bought something from the internet that promised to smell like clean. The TV still offered basketball like a prayer rug. "Look who's here," Aunt Marisol said, dimpled and earnest, handing me a plate like we were starting at snack instead of shame. "I made the good empanadas." "We're learning," she added before I could say any other version of hello. "We are learning." It is wild what 3 words can do to a room, how they can open windows no one remembered were painted shut. We formed teams again, but this time, my aunt said, "Let's do mixed," and paired me with Uncle Ray to stunt the old divisions. He leaned in and said, "I'm going to try not to be an ass." I said, "Great strategy." We meant it. In the second round of Scrabble, I drew tiles that spelled ledger if I was willing to play the G on a double letter off of an existing red that Tori had played a year ago in another timeline. She wasn't there, but her ghost liked vowels. The board left a perfect lane. I placed LEDGER across a triple word score. The room did a soft ooh because even people who don't keep receipts understand the satisfaction of naming a thing and watching it count. "Nice," my uncle said, a real compliment. "That's a money word." "It's a truth word," I said. I didn't announce the points. The board did the math. Halfway through, my phone lit with an email. Automatic habit made my eyes flick down. A message from M. Hyatt Concierge. My stomach did a dumb little flip, the body remembering a smiley face like a hand on the back of a chair. I shouldn't have looked. I did. "Just a note," it said. "Your dessert fund reached a guest at the right moment last weekend. We sent up a slice of cake and a pot of tea. They cried happy tears into both. Thank you for making our job nicer. M." Underneath was a photo of a room service tray, a white plate, a piece of cake with tragically glossy frosting, a porcelain teapot, 2 cups, a folded napkin, ordinary mercy, captured. I didn't tell the room. I put my phone face down and added it to the folder in my brain labeled after. Mateo grabbed a handful of pretzels and built a tower out of letter tiles. He knocked it over and cheered, like failure was a sport. I loved him so much I had to look away so the feeling wouldn't startle the night. After pizza and charades, stupid, necessary, my aunt took out the sugar canister. "I kept the 20, she said, tapping the ceramic lid, "for bread." We were both crying, which I guess makes a tradition. She wouldn't let me refill drinks that night. She kept darting to the kitchen to do it herself, like hostessing could be redeemed by precision. Maybe it can. Maybe it can't. Some things are rituals because we started them before we knew better. We continue them with better intent. On the drive back to Boston, my mother fell asleep in the passenger seat and woke up at a rest stop to say, "I wanted to be somebody like you when I was your age." and then went back under like a tide. Those sentences don't need responses. They need to be archived with care. I filed it under after and promised to make the folder fireproof. The next morning at the office, Priya asked if I'd review our vendor data processing agreements. Look for braggy verbs, she said. Turn them into obligations. So I did. I struck vendor endeavors too and wrote vendor shall. I circled best efforts and wrote reasonable efforts defined. I felt that click again, the one where you take a room full of maybes and draft a yes. When we sent the red lines, the vendor's lawyer wrote back, "We rarely see interns who wield a red pen like this." Priya replied, "We don't call it a red pen here, we call it a seatbelt." That night, I lay in bed and laughed out loud, quietly, like if I laughed too hard it would knock something loose. In April, Women in Tech asked me to keynote a small campus event, nothing fancy, a lecture hall in ISEC with fluorescent lighting that makes even resilient people look tired. I said yes because I wanted to put a period where there had been ellipses. I wore a navy blazer over a t-shirt that said, "Keep your own keys," in white letters Jess ironed on the night before, with a heat press she bought on a whim, and then used to customize everything from tote bags to a pillowcase that now reads, "Please nap." The lecture hall filled with students who had learned that free cookies at events matter more than any university will admit. I didn't tell them about Evan. I didn't mouth the word Hyatt. I talked about contracts you don't sign because you're scared of losing the opportunity. I talked about how people who plan to cheat often frame the honest person as dramatic to preempt the truth. I talked about the boring logs. I showed them the sugar canister 20. I held the binder up and said, "This saved me, not because the paper has magic, but because keeping track of what happened made me brave enough to stand in front of people and say what happened." They clapped in the way you clap when someone reminds you that the unglamorous things count. After, a freshman asked for a photo, then whispered, "My boyfriend says tracking rent receipts is accountant energy, and it makes me unattractive." I said, "Tell him I said, you'll be so lucky to be loved by an accountant." We laughed. We meant it. May brought tulips on our sill and acceptance emails for the micro scholarship from the Anna Trust. The winner, R, came to meet me on a bright Friday when the city smelled like bakery air and pollen. She wore a blue hijab and a backpack with 3 physics pins. She brought her lease and her scholarship award letter. We sat in a cafe in the South End that makes cookies the size of plates, and we read together. We crossed out a clause. We underlined a date. We wrote a question for her landlord. "I thought I had to be polite instead of specific," she said. "Thank you for showing me the difference." I walked home, behind a couple sharing an umbrella, and did the corny thing where you smile to yourself in public because sometimes you get to. For my birthday, Jess took me to a Red Sox game, and we pretended to love baseball for the hot dogs and the chance to tell each other secrets under stadium noise that eats admissions for breakfast. Later, back home, she handed me a small box. Inside, on a thin chain, was a tiny enameled charm, shaped like a key, the kind you draw as a kid when you think keys are all Victorian and whimsical. On the back, she'd had a jeweler etch a single word in letters so small it made you lean in, "Mine." I cried like a person who has finally purchased the world's correct coat. She took a photo of me, shoulders hunched, eyes messy, holding the key up against my throat. "I want to remember you like this," she said, in the quiet. We didn't post it. We put it in a folder called Private that I actually kept private. June came with the kind of heat that makes Boston smell like wet stone and fried food. The campus emptied, the city filled with tourists in matching t-shirts. My co-op supervisor asked if I wanted to stay through the end of August. "You make the documents better," she said. "I believe in paying people who make the boring things sing." I said yes. When I got home, I told the basil candle because it was lit, and I told the crane because it was looking at me like I'd learned a language. On the last night of the co-op, we had a small team dinner at a place in the seaport that tries to look industrial and fails because everything costs too much to be truly gritty. Priya made a toast that didn't include the word family, and for that alone, I will name a star after her. To Maya, she said, who turned our shoulds into shalls. The table laughed. I was not embarrassed. There are worse legacies. Later, walking back along the water, a breeze hit me that felt like the first absolutely honest thing that ever touched my face. I put my hand in my pocket and felt my keys. Not the Hyatt cards. Those were paper now, folded into a bird that watched my bookshelf. Not Evans. Those were gone, lock changed, Wi-Fi password renamed. My keys, apartment, mailbox, bike chain, office badge, the life that opens because I chose the door. I had thought I needed a scene to slam the book closed. I didn't. Closure isn't a door you slam. It's a window you open in July when the apartment is stuffy, and you're not sure whether the street sounds will make it worse or better, and then the air moves and you remember your lungs are yours. It's the basil candle burning without trying to prove anything. It's your aunt choosing basil over vanilla, and we're learning over don't take it so hard. It's a concierge buying cake for a stranger with your money and you not needing a photo to believe it did more good than a victory lap. It's a binder on a shelf you can reach without looking up. It's sleep not as a reward, but as a default. It's writing checks to the person you say you are. Months later in October, when the leaves did that performative New England thing where they pretend they invented color, the fraternity posted an event announcement for a panel on academic integrity. The graphic used a quote attributed this time to Maya, Northeastern student. "Keep your own keys." Jess texted me the screenshot with 17 key emojis and "Justice is a girl with a kiosk in the student center and a laminator." I smiled. Then I put my phone down and made soup. Here is the final image I kept for myself. The one I didn't need to show anyone, but that I will tell you because you are here and because I trust daylight like I trust locks. It's a Tuesday night. The apartment downstairs is making toast. The basil candle is a thumbnail of green light. The paper crane sits on the shelf by the book about engineering I read because it tells the truth without being dramatic. My sugar canister has a 20 in it. I take my keys from the hook, big ring, a little enamel charm that says, "Mine," a tab that opens the building, a tag with our Wi-Fi name, vault but for me. And I hold them in my hand for a second before I lock the door to go to the corner store for milk. The metal warms to my palm. The weight is perfect. It is the exact measure of the life I chose. No more, no less. The door clicks. The hallway smells like someone else's dinner. I walk toward the stairs. The whole building hums like a person who's finished a hard job and is ready to rest. I go out into the evening I made. I carry my own keys. The end.